Imagine coming home after a long, exhausting day, and everything seems normal. But there's something in the air, something you can't quite define, yet it sends chills down your spine. It's like the silence is speaking, like a shadow has settled between the two of you. And there you are, trying to ignore that instinct screaming that something is wrong. But that voice is impossible to silence. Betrayal doesn't always reveal itself with words. Sometimes it shows in gestures, in evasive glances, in changes that seem insignificant, but if you pay attention, they hit you like a closed fist. Because infidelity never comes alone. It leaves a clear trail if you know where to look. Today I'm going to reveal to you the 7 clearest signs that your wife has just been unfaithful. Some are so obvious they hurt, but the last one is the most brutal of all. I'm Celia, and what I'm about to tell you isn't pleasant, but it's necessary, because you deserve the truth even if it hurts. Stay until the end. Have you noticed that something has changed, but you can't explain it? The way she avoids you, how she pulls away, as if your touch is something uncomfortable. Like your skin, your caresses, what you once shared, has become an unpleasant reminder. Because the problem begins when she avoids physical contact with you at all costs. This doesn't happen by accident. It's not that she's simply tired or has too much on her mind. That's a lie. When a woman pulls away physically from you like that, there's something much deeper than simple indifference. It's guilt, it's rejection, it's discomfort. As if touching you burns her from the inside. Let me tell you something. When someone betrays you, every touch is a reminder of what they did. Every kiss they try to give feels fake. Every hug becomes cold and impersonal. And you feel it. You know it. Even if you force yourself to ignore it, even if you try to justify it to avoid facing the truth. Imagine this. You're in bed with her, and the silence is deafening. You try to hug her, and her body stiffens as if you're trying to hold a corpse. Even in the most intimate moments, you notice her mind is elsewhere. Everything you do feels mechanical, forced, as if she just wants it to be over as soon as possible. She doesn't want to look you in the eyes. She doesn't want you to caress her. She doesn't want you to touch her. But she doesn't say it directly. She just pulls away, distances herself, fades away. Why does this happen? Because betrayal leaves marks. Because when someone has just been unfaithful, guilt consumes them, comparison eats away at them. What was once natural and comfortable now feels dirty, like they have to hide something under their skin. And that's when you start noticing that she avoids any type of physical closeness, that the distance isn't just emotional, but physical as well. And here's the worst part. Because at first, you try to convince yourself it's just in your head, that you're overreacting. You try to be understanding, to give her space, but every time you try to get closer, the rejection becomes more obvious. Until it gets to a point where you can't ignore it anymore. Because physical contact, the kind that once expressed affection and desire, now becomes a minefield that blows up in your face every time you try to cross it. Maybe you think it's just a misunderstanding, that it's just a rough patch. But don't fool yourself. When a woman avoids you physically in such an obvious way, it's because something else is going on. And if she's just been unfaithful, that physical rejection becomes a silent confession. A mute scream that tells you exactly what's happening, even if she doesn't dare to say it in words. This isn't all. What comes next is going to hurt even more, but you need to hear it. Physical rejection isn't the only sign you should be watching for. Because when someone is carrying the weight of a recent betrayal, it's not just the way they touch you, or rather avoid touching you, that changes, but also how they present themselves to the world. And this is where we arrive at the second key point of this video, when they begin obsessively caring about their appearance. This isn't just a desire to look better, it's a transformation that goes far beyond the surface. Because when a woman who was always relaxed about her appearance suddenly becomes obsessed with the mirror, something is happening. Overnight, you notice that she buys new clothes more often than usual, spends hours getting ready even when there's no obvious reason to, and starts applying makeup with a precision that never existed before. And you know the most ironic thing about it? That effort isn't for you. That constant ritual in front of the mirror, those hours spent perfecting every detail, are for someone else. Someone who has awakened an urgency in her that, apparently, you no longer provoke. The psychology behind this change is brutally clear, because when someone is attracted to another person, their most basic instinct is to please, impress, seduce. It doesn't matter how many years you two have been together or how much history you share. At that moment, her priority is to feel desired by someone else. And to achieve that, she begins to modify her appearance in ways she hasn't bothered with in a long time. It's as if she's triggered an internal alarm that forces her to reinvent herself to become more attractive for someone else. But here's the worst part, because while you watch her, wondering why she's getting so dressed up just to run a quick errand or meet a friend, she gives vague answers or simply avoids letting you ask too many questions. And if you decide to question her, she immediately throws the most overused excuse of all. What, can't I just dress up for myself? And while that phrase sounds logical and even noble, the truth is, it often hides a devastating reality. Because when someone suddenly becomes obsessed with their appearance, they rarely do it for their own well-being. The Stoic philosophy warns us clearly, you should never depend on external validation to feel complete. True change comes from within and doesn't need to be demonstrated to the world with a renewed disguise. However, when someone feels the need to completely reinvent themselves overnight, what they're desperately seeking is approval from someone else. That person is no longer comfortable in their own skin because they feel they must transform to meet the expectations or desires of someone else. Now, what does this mean for you in all of this? You begin to notice that almost obsessive dedication to her appearance. You realize that even when she's at home, she always finds an excuse to dress better, to look different. It's like she doesn't want you to see her as she is, but as the polished version she's projecting outward. And if you're honest with yourself, you know this isn't normal. No one puts that much effort into looking good when their mind and heart are at peace. Even worse, it's the way she becomes irritable when you notice these changes and bring it up. Because guilt, when mixed with the fear of being caught, manifests as anger. In hurtful comments, in arguments that come out of nowhere, in the way she makes you feel like you're the problem for noticing the obvious. Because she wants to keep playing her role uninterrupted, to keep projecting that perfect image for someone else without you interfering in the process. And the saddest part is that while she's dedicated to perfecting every aspect of her appearance to impress another man, you're left there watching her pull away, watching her rebuild herself so that someone else admires her. Because this is the brutal truth. The sudden obsession with looking better isn't a sign of self-love. It's a blatant indication that her attention is on someone else. Obsessive attention to appearance and physical rejection are alarming, but there's something even more obvious when someone is trying to hide a betrayal. Because when guilt mixes with the need to conceal the truth, their schedules and excuses stop making sense. We've reached the third point of this video, and this is where things start to change blatantly. Think about this. Someone who acts normally in their routine has nothing to hide. Their schedule is predictable, their behavior makes sense. But when infidelity is present, that order is broken. Sudden outings, last-minute meetings, calls they used to answer calmly, but now take in secret. Everything starts to revolve around a series of justifications that, if you listen carefully, simply don't add up. The strategy you need to apply here is simple, but extremely powerful: observation without confrontation. This means that instead of confronting her immediately, you should gather the information you need with coldness and clarity. The Stoics talked about the importance of objective perception, not letting yourself be carried away by immediate emotions, and staying calm in any adverse situation. Because if you let yourself get consumed by anger or desperation, you'll end up making mistakes. Observe her movements, listen to what she says and how she says it. If she assures you she's staying late at work, investigate if that's true. If she says she's meeting a friend, pay attention to the details she omits. It's not about obsessing, but about acting intelligently. Because here, you're not just trying to uncover the truth. You're taking control of the situation so they can't keep pulling the wool over your eyes. Let me give you an example. Imagine one day she tells you she's going to the supermarket and won't be long. But 2 hours pass and you haven't heard from her. When she gets back, her answers are vague, her attitude unusually defensive. Instead of making a scene, you simply take note of her behavior. You realize this has been happening more frequently lately. You start to notice that it's always similar excuses. There's always a place she says she went, but you can never quite confirm it. That's when you apply observation without confrontation. Why does the strategy work? Because the reality is that someone who lies often trips over their own words. And if you stay calm and observe closely, those mistakes start piling up until they become impossible to ignore. Because this isn't just about discovering infidelity. It's about regaining control that someone else is trying to take from you. And the only way to do that is to understand that the truth is revealed through patterns, not through impulsive confrontations. Before moving on to the stronger points, I want you to tell me something important. If this message has resonated with you so far, subscribe now and give this video a like. I also want to know where you're watching from, and if you've ever noticed suspicious behaviors like these, leave me a comment, because what's coming next is going to be even more brutal. You've learned to observe without confronting, to realize that strange schedules and nonsensical excuses are more than simple oversights. But if you think those are the only signs that something is very wrong, you're mistaken, because what truly separates a passing suspicion from absolute certainty is when she disappears emotionally for no reason. And that's the fourth point we're going to discuss now. When a woman pulls away emotionally, betrayal is no longer a physical act or just a disorder in her routines. It's a subtle abandonment that leaves you feeling empty without you even realizing it. Because in the end, the problem isn't that she distances herself physically or invents excuses to avoid being present. The real hell is when the woman who once was emotionally connected to you now seems distant, cold, as if she no longer cares. And worst of all, sometimes she doesn't even bother to hide it. But here's where most men fall into the most destructive trap of all. That trap is so subtly planted in the mind that it's barely perceptible. Because the common mistake is to think that this emotional distance is just a phase, a simple communication problem that will resolve itself over time. But that's not the case. That emotional distance you're feeling isn't due to a bad day, work stress, or an insignificant mood swing. It's the emptiness left by someone who has chosen to give her attention and energy to someone else. The problem is that, in a desperate attempt to regain what you feel you're losing, you begin to do exactly what she expects you to do. You try harder, you become more accommodating, you accept every excuse she gives, and you try to convince yourself that everything is fine. Because hope becomes your worst enemy. The hope that everything will go back to the way it was, that the connection that once seemed unbreakable still exists. But the reality is that the more you try to please her, the more she pulls away, because your desperation to fix things only shows her that you're a man with no control over his own life. And the truth is brutal, because when a woman disconnects emotionally, you're no longer her priority. You're no longer the person she thinks about when she wakes up or when she goes to bed. You're no longer her emotional refuge. You're just someone who's there, someone who serves to keep up appearances or justify her own decisions. In her mind, you're already part of the past while she tries to build a present with someone else. The worst part is that this emotional distance happens so gradually that you could spend months or even years refusing to see the obvious. You convince yourself that her lack of interest is normal, that all the wear and tear is just part of a long-term relationship. And the more you convince yourself of that, the more you allow them to take your peace, your energy, and your self-respect. What you need to understand is that emotional distance isn't an accident. It's not something that just happens. It's a conscious or unconscious decision to give her attention and desire to someone else. And instead of accepting it and taking action to regain your dignity, you fall into the trap of trying to fix something that's already broken. Because the reality is that you can't force someone to love you, nor can you win back someone who has already decided they don't want you in their life. But you can do something much more important: regain control of your own well-being, stop begging for a connection that no longer exists, and start prioritizing yourself above anything else. Because the real mistake isn't that she pulls away. The real mistake is that you allow it, that you cling to the idea that if you keep insisting, somehow everything will fix itself. But it doesn't work that way. And the sooner you accept it, the sooner you can free yourself from the emotional prison you've created. Accepting that someone has emotionally distanced themselves is brutal, but there's something many men simply aren't prepared to face. Because when a woman starts to disconnect emotionally, guilt doesn't take long to find someone to blame. And if you thought emotional coldness was enough punishment, get ready for what's coming. Because she blames you for everything and creates conflicts without reason. This is the fifth point we're going to discuss. Guilt is a powerful mechanism. No one wants to feel like the villain in their own story. So, what does someone who has betrayed your trust and knows it do? They make you the villain. Because if they can convince you that you're responsible for all the bad things happening, then their betrayal becomes something justified. It's the cruelest logic that can be applied, but at the same time, it's the most effective. Because while you're torn trying to figure out what you did wrong, she absolves herself of any responsibility. The worst part is that in your desperate attempt to save what you think still exists, you fall into her game. You start wondering if you were too demanding, too indifferent, too controlling, or too permissive. You begin to adjust your behavior to please her, to prove that you can be what she needs. But what you don't understand is that this desperate effort not only makes you lose your dignity, but also encourages her to continue manipulating you. Because as long as you keep trying to fix a problem that's not yours, you'll remain stuck in an endless cycle of frustration and self-destruction. Think about this. Every time she starts a fight over insignificant things, every time she attacks you with hurtful words or brings up flaws you've never heard before, she's not trying to resolve a conflict. She's trying to justify her own guilt. Because in her mind, if she can make you the bad guy, then her actions become less blameworthy. Her infidelity becomes a logical response to a problem she invented herself. And you, blinded by the desire to fix things, fall into the trap over and over again. Until one day, you realize you're no longer the person you used to be, that you've lost your confidence, your strength, your dignity, that you've become someone who lives trying to please someone who clearly no longer respects you. And you don't realize that this effort to keep her by your side is exactly what pushes her further away. Because the man you are now has nothing to do with the man who once attracted her. But here comes the harshest truth. Nothing you do will change the situation as long as you keep trying to please her. As long as you continue trying to meet her impossible demands, she will always find a reason to criticize you, to make you feel like you're not enough. And if you stay on that path, the only thing waiting for you is more frustration, more emotional dependency, and more loss of self-respect. So what can you do? First, accept that you can't fix something that doesn't want to be fixed. Because this isn't about saving the relationship, it's about saving yourself. The only way to get out of this trap is to stop playing her game. Stop trying to convince her that you're worth it, that you're the man she needs. Because the reality is that if she doesn't see it for herself, nothing you say or do will change it. The mentality you need to adopt is brutally simple. Your well-being comes first. Stop begging. Stop justifying yourself. Stop giving in every time she blames you for something that clearly isn't your responsibility. Because when you finally decide that your dignity is worth more than any relationship, that's when you start to take back control of your life. Breaking this pattern isn't easy. It's going to hurt. It's going to feel like you're losing something you never wanted to lose. But what you're really losing is that weak version of yourself that let itself be manipulated, that accepted living in a constant state of guilt and desperation, because that version of you has to die for you to be reborn with the strength you were always meant to have. You've understood that trying to please her, beg her, justify yourself, or change to meet her demands is a fatal mistake. That every attempt to prove you're the man she needs only serves to destroy your dignity even more. But what's coming now is even more painful, because if you thought senseless arguments and baseless blame were the worst punishment, you're about to discover something even more heartbreaking, because the sudden change in her desire is not accidental. She suddenly changes her interest in intimacy, and that's a direct blow to your self-esteem. Imagine this. For years, intimacy between you was something natural, maybe not perfect, but authentic, and now everything feels different. Either she shows absolute disinterest, as if any attempt to get close is a nuisance, something that must be avoided at all costs, or on the other hand, she's excessively passionate, as if she wants to cover up an emotional void with a sudden desire. Neither of these scenarios is normal. Both are clear signs that something is rotten in the relationship. But here's where it hits hardest, because most men, upon seeing this abrupt change in intimacy, blame themselves. They think it's their fault she's lost interest, that maybe they're not doing enough to keep the attraction alive, and they fall into the same trap we mentioned earlier. Trying to please her, modifying their behavior to make her feel what she once felt. But what they don't understand is that this coldness or exaggerated passion has nothing to do with them. Because when someone has just been unfaithful, intimacy becomes a minefield. If she constantly rejects you, it's because she doesn't want to expose herself. She doesn't want you to get too close because she fears you'll discover what she's done. Because every touch from you reminds her of the betrayal she committed, and her only way out is to pull away, avoid you, pretend she no longer desires you, when the reality is that she doesn't want you to discover what she did. And if, on the other hand, she becomes excessively passionate, that's also not a good sign, because that sudden passion is a desperate attempt to cover up the guilt, to show you that everything is fine, to erase any suspicion you might have. It's the classic strategy of someone trying to deceive not only the other person, but themselves as well. Because if she convinces you there's still desire, she can justify her betrayal as something that means nothing, as a small mistake that can be erased with a simple display of affection. But here comes the most devastating part, because while you try to understand why intimacy between you has become so twisted, while you struggle to get back what you think you've lost, she keeps moving forward in her own reality. That reality where you're just an accessory, a part that keeps up the facade of a relationship that no longer exists. And while you wear yourself out trying to reignite that spark that once was natural, she uses every one of your attempts as proof that she can continue manipulating you. It's a sickening cycle that destroys you slowly, because the more you insist on fixing what's broken, the more power you give her to keep playing with you. And you don't realize that this effort to regain intimacy is what's ultimately destroying any respect you might have had for yourself. Because each rejection, every desperate attempt to prove that you're enough, just sinks you deeper into an abyss of frustration and dependence. The reality is brutal. When interest in intimacy changes so drastically, it's rarely due to a simple relationship problem. Betrayal leaves marks, and intimacy is one of the places where those marks show most clearly, because guilt and desire cannot coexist without something breaking. And if you keep insisting on fixing what's already been shattered, the only thing you'll achieve is to destroy yourself in the process. There's still one more point, the most blatant of all, the one that can confirm everything you've suspected so far, because what I'm about to tell you next is the most obvious proof that she's betraying you. And if you choose to ignore it, then you're the one digging your own grave. Get ready for the worst. So far, you've seen how physical rejection, the sudden obsession with her appearance, confusing schedules, emotional distance, manipulation through senseless arguments, and drastic changes in intimacy all point to the same truth. But none of this compares to the final sign, the one that simply can't be hidden. Because if there's one thing that betrays someone who has just been unfaithful, it's when they protect their phone like it's a state secret. Think about this. Before, that device was just an ordinary object, something she'd leave on the table without a second thought, something that would ring without being hidden. But now everything has changed. It doesn't matter if she's cooking, showering, or sleeping. Her phone is never out of reach. It becomes an extension of her hand, an object she guards more fiercely than her own life. And do you know why? Because in that device, which used to mean nothing, is the most undeniable proof of her betrayal. Honest people don't need to hide anything. Their phones aren't locked away with endless passwords or devices they carry with them to the bathroom, to bed, to any corner where you can't see them. But when someone acts that way, when they become aggressive or defensive if you accidentally touch their phone, it's because there's something there they don't want you to discover, something that would expose them immediately. It's sad, but most men ignore this sign or worse, turn a blind eye because they'd rather live in the lie than face the truth. Because accepting that your woman is hiding something on her phone is accepting that everything you suspected is true. That those silent calls, those deleted messages, those changed passwords are more than just details. They're the brutal confession that her loyalty no longer belongs to you. And here is where you must make a decision that will define whether you'll continue living in the shadow of someone who is clearly using you, or if you will reclaim your dignity once and for all. Because most men make a fatal mistake. They approach the situation with desperation, with anger, with the need to get answers. But the reality is that those answers don't matter. What matters is what you decide to do with the truth that's already in front of you. Because if you continue accepting being treated as a nuisance, being seen as a fool who can be manipulated and lied to over and over again, then you're not a victim of her betrayal. You're a victim of your own cowardice. Because in the end, what keeps you in that broken relationship isn't love. It's the fear of being alone, the fear of accepting that it's over, the realization that you've been wasting time with someone who never valued you. True change begins when you decide that no one else is going to define your worth, that you don't need the approval of someone who has already turned their back on you, because if you allow that phone to be more important than you, then you've already lost, not to her but to yourself, to that weak man you let be born inside of you when you chose to ignore all the signs. Now, it's your turn to decide. You can keep living the lie, clinging to the idea that if you do things differently, she'll change. Or you can open your eyes, accept the truth no matter how painful it is, and begin to rebuild yourself from the ashes of what you once were. Because the real betrayal isn't the one she committed, it's the one you commit against yourself when you choose to ignore the obvious. If you've made it this far, then you know that the next step is the most important of all, because you already know the truth. The question now is, are you going to keep allowing yourself to be treated like a fool, or are you going to reclaim your dignity once and for all? The decision is yours. If you've made it this far, you're already different. Because accepting the truth, no matter how painful, is an act of bravery that few are willing to face. Many prefer to live in denial, close their eyes, and pretend everything is fine. But not you. You chose to listen until the end. And that means that, as much as it hurts, you're ready to face reality. To take control of your life instead of continuing to crawl behind someone who never valued you. Now you have two options. You can keep lying to yourself, pretending everything will get fixed if you're more accommodating, more patient, more understanding. Or you can look at yourself in the mirror and decide that no one, absolutely no one, has the right to destroy your dignity. Because if anything is clear in this video, it's that the real betrayal isn't hers. It's the one you commit against yourself when you choose to ignore the obvious and stay in a relationship that's destroying you. Let me tell you something important. This channel exists to open your eyes, to pull you out of that weak mindset that keeps you imprisoned. Here, we're not going to give you empty speeches about forgiveness or acceptance. We're here to remind you that your dignity and peace are worth more than any broken relationship. The only way to move forward is by making firm decisions, even when they hurt, even if they leave you alone, even if no one else understands them. If this message hit you like it was supposed to, I want you to leave a comment with these words: I won't betray myself. Because that's the only thing that truly matters. Knowing that no matter what happens, you'll never let anyone manipulate you, humiliate you, or turn you into a mere accessory in someone else's life. Also, tell me which country you're watching from, because I want to know how far this message reaches. And if you want to be part of this community of men and women who decided to wake up, subscribe now. This channel is for those who are looking for real answers, for those who are ready to face the truth no matter how painful, uncomfortable, or life-changing it may be. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because maybe you've already opened your eyes, but there are others who are still trapped in the lie, and we won't stop until every one of them wakes up. I'm Celia, and this is House of Wisdom. The conversation doesn't end here. Choose one of the videos on screen and keep learning what no one else dares to tell you, because this is your moment to awaken.